Rude waiter insults millionaire for giving food to a poor girl. God teaches him a lesson. The soft glow of street lamps illuminated the bustling city sidewalk as Samuel Thorne made his way toward Le Jardin, one of the most prestigious restaurants. In the heart of Metropolitan. Despite his considerable wealth, Samuel's attire was understated, a simple navy blazer over a crisp white shirt paired with well-worn jeans. His salt-and-pepper hair, slightly disheveled by the evening breeze, gave him an air of approachable charm that belied his status as one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. As he approached the restaurant's ornate entrance, something caught his eye. A young girl, no more than 13, stood pressed against the window, her wide eyes fixed on the sumptuous dishes being served inside. Her threadbare coat and scuffed shoes told a story of hardship, a stark contrast to the opulence on display just beyond the glass. Samuel paused, his hand on the door handle. The girl's gaze was so intense, so full of longing that it stirred something deep within him. He had seen that look before, in his own reflection many years ago, when he was just a boy dreaming of a better life. "Excuse me," he said softly, approaching the girl. She startled, taking a step back, her eyes now wide with apprehension rather than wonder. "Are you hungry?" The girl hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "What's your name?" Samuel asked, his voice gentle. "Maria," she whispered, her eyes darting between Samuel and the ground. Samuel smiled warmly. "Well, Maria, how would you like to join me for dinner?" Before Maria could respond, the restaurant door swung open, and a tall, impeccably dressed man stepped out. His severe expression hardened as he took in the scene before him. "Is there a problem here, sir?" he asked, his tone clipped and cold. Samuel turned to face the man, his expression resolute. "No problem at all. I was just about to escort my dinner guest inside." The maitre d's eyebrows shot up, his gaze shifting between Samuel and Maria with undisguised disdain. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, sir. We have certain standards to maintain." As Samuel opened his mouth to argue, Maria tugged at his sleeve. "It's okay," she murmured. "I should go." But Samuel stood his ground, his jaw set with determination. He knew that what happened next would shape not just this evening, but the lives of everyone involved. With a deep breath, he prepared to challenge the status quo, unaware that his simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The interior of Le Jardin was a symphony of elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in pristine white linen, while the gentle tinkling of silverware mingled with the soft murmur of conversation. As Samuel stepped inside, with Maria cautiously following, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. Marcos, the maitre d', hurried after them, his face a mask of barely concealed outrage. "Sir, I must insist." Samuel turned to face him, his voice low but firm. "I'd like a table for two, please, and I'd appreciate it if you could bring some bread and water right away. My guest is hungry." Marcos's nostrils flared. "Mr. Thorne, Samuel Thorne." A flicker of recognition passed across Marcos's face, but it did little to soften his demeanor. "Mr. Thorne, while we appreciate your charitable inclinations, Le Jardin is not a soup kitchen. Perhaps I could recommend a more suitable establishment." Samuel felt Maria shrink beside him, and his resolve hardened. "Marcos, is it? I'm not asking for charity. I'm a paying customer, and I'm requesting a table for myself and my guest. Now, will you seat us, or shall I speak with the manager?" A tense silence fell over the nearby tables as other diners turned to watch the unfolding drama. Marcos, acutely aware of the attention, plastered on a tight smile. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Right this way." As they followed Marcos to a table tucked away in a corner, Samuel could feel the weight of judgmental stares. He heard snippets of whispered conversations. The nerve of some people. "This isn't a place for street urchins. What is the world coming to?" But there were other voices too, softer and less certain. "Poor thing looks half-starved. It's his money, isn't it? Let him spend it how he likes. Wish I had the courage to do something like that." Samuel pulled out a chair for Maria, who sat down gingerly, her eyes darting nervously around the opulent room. He took the seat opposite her, fixing Marcos with a steady gaze. We'll start with the soup of the day, please. And could you bring an extra portion of bread? Marcos gave a curt nod and turned on his heel, disappearing into the kitchen. Samuel turned his attention to Maria, who was staring at the array of cutlery before her with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Don't worry about all that," he said softly. "Just use whichever feels comfortable. The food's the important part, not how you eat it." Maria nodded, a ghost of a smile flickering across her face. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I've never been in a place like this before." Samuel leaned in, his voice conspiratorial. "Want to know a secret? Neither had I until I was much older than you. But do you know what I learned?" Maria shook her head. "I learned that places like this, they're just buildings. What matters is how we treat each other, no matter where we are." As Maria absorbed his words, Samuel noticed a commotion near the kitchen. Marcos was engaged in a heated discussion with a younger waitress who was gesturing emphatically towards their table. After a moment, the waitress broke away, heading towards them with a basket of bread and a carafe of water. "Here you are," she said warmly, setting the items on the table. "I'm Emily. I'll be taking care of you this evening. Is there anything else I can get you while you wait for your soup?" Samuel smiled gratefully at Emily. "This is perfect. Thank you." As Emily walked away, Samuel caught Marcos glaring in their direction. He knew the battle was far from over, but for now he focused on the simple joy of watching Maria take her first bite of the freshly baked bread, her eyes widening with delight. In that moment, surrounded by luxury, yet touched by the profound simplicity of sharing a meal with someone in need, Samuel felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he'd experienced in years. He didn't know it yet, but this evening would not only change his life, but spark a movement that would ripple through the entire city. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere in Le Jardin grew increasingly tense. The initial shock of Samuel and Maria's presence had given way to a constant undercurrent of whispered conversations and furtive glances. The restaurant had become a microcosm of society, with battle lines drawn between those who approved of Samuel's actions and those who found them deeply unsettling. At a nearby table, a group of well-heeled businessmen muttered disapprovingly among themselves. "This is precisely why we can't have nice things," one of them said loudly enough for Samuel to hear. "Give them an inch, and soon they'll be overrunning the place." Another man, his face flushed with expensive wine, added, "I didn't pay for a 5-star experience to dine next to riffraff. Where's the management in this place?" Samuel felt a surge of anger, but before he could respond, he heard a soft voice from the table behind him. "Oh, Harold, do be quiet. Can't you see the poor child is hungry? What harm is there in showing a little kindness?" He turned slightly to see an elderly woman admonishing her companion, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of mischief and compassion. She caught Samuel's eye and gave him a small nod of approval. Meanwhile, Maria was doing her best to navigate the unfamiliar world of fine dining. She had managed the soup course with only minor difficulty, but now faced a daunting array of utensils as the main course arrived. Emily, the kind waitress, had brought her a child-sized portion of roast chicken with vegetables, while Samuel had opted for the beef tenderloin. "Just start from the outside and work your way in," Samuel advised gently, demonstrating with his own cutlery. "And remember, it's not a test. The food's meant to be enjoyed, not stressed over." Maria nodded, cautiously picking up her fork. As she took her first bite of the perfectly roasted chicken, her eyes widened in delight. "It's so good," she whispered, as if afraid speaking too loudly might break the spell and reveal this all to be a dream. Samuel smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. It was a simple thing, really, to share a meal, yet the joy on Maria's face made it feel like the most important act in the world. Their moment of peace was short-lived, however. Marcos appeared at the table, his face a mask of forced politeness. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. Thorne?" he asked, pointedly ignoring Maria. "The food is excellent," Samuel replied evenly, "though I must say the atmosphere leaves something to be desired." Marcos's smile tightened. "Perhaps if you had informed us in advance of your unique dining arrangements, we could have better accommodated you." Samuel met Marcos's gaze steadily. "And perhaps if your establishment truly lived up to its reputation for excellence, such arrangements wouldn't be necessary. True hospitality, Marcos, knows no boundaries of class or status. A muscle twitched in Marcos's jaw, but before he could respond, a commotion arose from the restaurant's entrance. All heads turned to see a disheveled woman burst through the doors, her eyes wild with panic. "Maria!" she cried out, scanning the room frantically. "Maria, are you here?" Maria's fork clattered to her plate. "Mama?" she gasped, half rising from her seat. As the woman's gaze fell upon Maria, relief flooded her features, quickly followed by confusion as she took in the opulent surroundings and her daughter's unlikely dining companion. Marcos strode towards the woman, his voice sharp. "Madam, you cannot simply barge in here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Samuel stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "No, you won't. This woman is my guest's mother, and she is welcome at our table." The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes on the unfolding drama. In that moment of stillness, Samuel realized that what had begun as a simple act of kindness had become something much larger, a challenge to the very foundations of social norms and expectations. As Maria's mother approached their table, her expression a mixture of gratitude and apprehension, Samuel knew that the real test was only just beginning. The question now was not just whether he could provide a meal for a hungry child, but whether he could change hearts and minds in a world all too often divided by wealth and status. The silence in Le Jardin was palpable as Maria's mother made her way to their table, her worn shoes echoing on the polished marble floor. Marcos hovered nearby, clearly torn between his instinct to remove the unwanted intruder and his fear of further angering Samuel Thorne, whose identity and influence were becoming increasingly clear to him. "Mama," Maria said softly, rising from her chair. The two embraced tightly, the contrast between Maria's newly pressed napkin and her mother's threadbare coat stark in the restaurant's unforgiving light. Samuel stood, extending his hand to the woman. "I'm Samuel Thorne. Please, join us. There's plenty of food." Maria's mother hesitated, her eyes darting between Samuel, her daughter, and the openly staring patrons. I'm Elena. I'm so sorry for the disturbance. When Maria didn't come home, I feared the worst. I've been searching for hours." Samuel pulled out a chair for Elena. "No apology necessary. Please sit. I'm sure you must be exhausted." As Elena sank into the chair, Marcos stepped forward, his voice strained. "Mr. Thorne, while we appreciate your generosity, I'm afraid we simply cannot what, Marcos?" Samuel interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "Cannot show basic human kindness? Cannot recognize that a mother's love knows no boundaries of wealth or status? Tell me, what exactly is it that you cannot do?" Marcos opened his mouth, then closed, it again seemingly at a loss for words. In the ensuing silence, a new voice spoke up, the elderly woman from the neighboring table. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said, rising from her seat with surprising agility. "If this young man won't do his job properly, I'll do it myself." She approached their table, smiling warmly at Elena. "My dear, you must be famished. Let me fetch you a plate." Before anyone could protest, the woman had disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a fully laden plate. She set it before Elena with a flourish. "There you are. Now eat up, both of you. Growing girls need their strength, and I suspect you've been going without to make sure your daughter is fed." Elena's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're very kind." The elderly woman patted Elena's shoulder. "Nonsense. It's just basic decency, something that seems to be in short supply these days." She shot a pointed look at Marcos before returning to her own table. As Elena began to eat, Samuel turned his attention to Maria. "You gave your mother quite a scare, young lady. Why didn't you tell her where you were going?" Maria looked down, shame coloring her cheeks. I was embarrassed. I didn't want her to know I was begging. She works so hard, but it's never enough. I thought if I could just get some food, maybe she wouldn't have to worry so much." Elena reached out, clasping her daughter's hand. "Oh, Mija, you don't need to protect me. We're in this together always." Samuel felt a lump form in his throat as he watched the interaction. He thought of his own childhood, of the times he had gone to bed hungry, of the shame and desperation that poverty breeds. But he also thought of the small acts of kindness that had sustained him, that had given him hope when all seemed lost. "Eleanor," he said gently, "if you don't mind me asking, what kind of work do you do?" Eleanor straightened, a hint of pride entering her voice despite her circumstances. "I'm a seamstress. I do alterations mostly. When I can get the work, that is." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. An idea was forming in his mind, one that could potentially change not just this evening, but the entire trajectory of Elena and Maria's lives. But before he could voice it, a commotion at the restaurant's entrance drew everyone's attention. A man had entered, elderly, simply dressed, but with an aura of quiet authority that seemed to fill the room. As he surveyed the scene before him, his eyes twinkling with an almost otherworldly knowledge, Samuel felt a strange sensation wash over him. It was as if, in that moment, the true magnitude of what was unfolding here became clear. This evening, he realized, was about far more than just one meal or one family. It was about challenging the very foundations of a society that too often valued wealth over worth, appearance over essence. And as the old man's gaze met his, Samuel had the uncanny feeling that he was about to become part of something much larger than himself. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not just change lives, but potentially reshape the very fabric of their community. All that remained was for someone to take the first step. The elderly man's entrance had cast a spell over Le Jardin. Conversations hushed, cutlery stilled, and all eyes turned to watch as he made his way through the restaurant with slow, deliberate steps. There was something in his bearing, a quiet dignity that commanded respect without demanding it. As he approached Samuel's table, Marcos intercepted him, a forced smile plastered on his face. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" The old man's eyes twinkled with amusement. "A reservation? My boy, I have a standing invitation to every table where kindness is served." Marcos blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. I'm not sure I understand, sir." "No," the old man said gently. "I don't suppose you do, not yet at least." He turned his attention to Samuel, Elena, and Maria. "May I join you?" Samuel stood, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please, be our guest." As the old man sat down, he surveyed the table with a warm smile. "What a lovely gathering. I couldn't help but notice the, shall we say, unique circumstances of your dinner party." Elena shifted uncomfortably, but Maria leaned forward, intrigued by the newcomer. "Are you an angel?" she asked, her voice filled with childlike wonder. The old man chuckled. "An angel? No, my dear. Just an old man who's learned a thing or two about the importance of sharing bread with strangers." He turned to Samuel. "You've caused quite a stir this evening, young man." Samuel met the old man's gaze steadily. Sometimes a stir is necessary, to shake people out of their complacency. "Indeed," the old man nodded. "But tell me, what motivated you to invite this young lady to dine with you?" Samuel glanced at Maria, his expression softening. I saw hunger in her eyes, not just for food, but for dignity, for acknowledgement of her humanity. I've been in her shoes before, and I know what it's like to be invisible. The old man's eyes seemed to pierce right through Samuel. "And you, madam," he addressed Elena, "what brought you here tonight?" Elena straightened, a mix of pride and desperation in her voice. "Love for my daughter, fear for her safety, and hope. Hope that somehow things could be different." "Hope," the old man repeated, his voice resonating with deep understanding. A powerful force indeed. He turned his attention to Marcos, who had been hovering nearby, unsure of how to handle this unexpected turn of events. "And you, my friend, what do you see when you look at this table?" Marcos hesitated, his carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling under the old man's gentle scrutiny. I see a disruption of our normal procedures, a potential threat to our reputation." "Ah," the old man nodded. "But might I suggest an alternative perspective? What if, instead of a disruption, this is an opportunity? An opportunity to redefine what true luxury means, to show that the greatest status symbol of all is not exclusivity, but inclusivity. A murmur rippled through the restaurant as other diners leaned in, captivated by the old man's words. Samuel felt a surge of emotion, sensing that they were on the cusp of something transformative. The old man stood, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed patrons of Le Jardin, tonight you have been witnesses to an extraordinary act of kindness. But the question now is, will it remain an isolated incident, or will it become the catalyst for lasting change?" He gestured to Samuel, Elena, and Maria. "Here before you sit individuals from vastly different walks of life, sharing a meal as equals. Is this not the very essence of civilization? The ability to break bread together, to see the humanity in one another, regardless of our circumstances." The restaurant had fallen completely silent, every eye fixed on the old man. Even Marcos seemed transfixed, his earlier hostility replaced by a look of dawning realization. I put it to you," the old man continued, his voice growing in passion, "that true luxury is not found in exclusive menus or high prices. It is found in the richness of human connection, in the generosity of spirit that uplifts us all." He turned to Marcos. "Young man, you have been given a rare opportunity tonight, the chance to be part of something truly meaningful. Will you rise to the occasion?" Marcos swallowed hard, his eyes darting between the old man, Samuel, and the rest of the patrons. In that moment, standing at the crossroads of tradition and transformation, he faced a choice that would define not just this evening, but the very identity of Le Jardin moving forward. The air in the restaurant crackled with tension and possibility. As all eyes turned to Marcos, awaiting his response, it became clear that his decision would set the tone for what was to come. The catalyst had been introduced. Now it remained to be seen how far-reaching its effects would be. Marcos stood frozen, the weight of expectation heavy upon his shoulders. The silence in the restaurant was deafening, punctuated only by the soft clink of silverware and the muted ticking of the ornate clock above the bar. He looked around the room, taking in the faces of the patrons, some curious, some judgmental, some encouraging. His gaze finally settled on Maria, her young face a mixture of hope and apprehension. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of himself. From long ago, a child full of dreams, facing a world that often seemed cold and unforgiving. With a deep breath, Marcos straightened his posture and turned to face the old man. "Sir," he began, his voice quavering slightly before gaining strength. "You're right. I've been short-sighted, focused on rules and appearances when I should have been focusing on humanity." He turned to Samuel, Eleanor, and Maria. "I owe you an apology. My behavior has been inexcusable. You came here seeking nothing more than a meal and basic human dignity, and I treated you with contempt. I am deeply sorry." A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. Samuel nodded solemnly, acknowledging Marcos's words. "Apology accepted, Marcos. Thank you for your honesty." Marcos wasn't finished, however. He addressed the room at large, his voice carrying clearly to every corner. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed patrons of Le Jardin, tonight we have all been witness to something extraordinary. We've been reminded of the true meaning of hospitality, of what it means to be part of a community." He paused, taking another deep breath before continuing. "Effective immediately, Le Jardin will be instituting a new policy. For every 10 meals we serve, we will provide 1 meal free of charge to someone in need. We will partner with local shelters and community organizations to ensure that those who need it most can experience the dignity of a good meal in a welcoming environment." A buzz of conversation erupted throughout the restaurant. Some patrons nodded approvingly, while others looked skeptical or even angry. Marcos held up his hands, calling for quiet. "I understand this may be a controversial decision. Some of you may feel that it will change the exclusivity of Le Jardin, and you're right, it will. But I believe it will change us for the better. We have an opportunity here to redefine what true luxury means, to show that real class isn't about keeping people out but about lifting people up." The elderly woman who had earlier shown kindness to Eleanor stood up, applauding. "Bravo, young man. It's about time someone had the courage to do the right thing." Gradually, more and more patrons joined in the applause. Even those who had initially seemed resistant found themselves swept up in the moment, touched by the sincerity. of Marcos's words and the palpable sense of change in the air. Samuel turned to Elena and Maria, his eyes shining. "What do you think? Would you be willing to help us set this new policy in motion, to be our honored guests and help us understand how we can best serve those in need?" Elena's eyes welled with tears. "Mr. Thorne, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever could have imagined." Maria, however, had no such hesitation. She jumped up, throwing her arms around Marcos in an impulsive hug. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled against his crisp white shirt. "Thank you for seeing us." Marcos, initially startled, gradually relaxed into the embrace. When Maria stepped back, there were tears in his eyes as well. "No, thank you," he said softly. "Thank you for reminding me of what's truly important." The old man, who had been watching these proceedings with a serene smile, now stepped forward. "Well done, all of you," he said, his voice warm with approval. "You've taken the first step on a remarkable journey. Remember this moment, for it is the small acts of kindness, the choices we make to see and uplift one another, that truly change the world." As the old man turned to leave, Samuel called out, "Wait, we don't even know your name." The old man paused at the door, a mysterious twinkle in his eye. "Names are not important," he said. "What matters is that you recognize the divine spark in every person you meet. Remember that, and you'll never go wrong." With that, he was gone, leaving behind a room full of people forever changed by the events of the evening. As Samuel looked around at the faces of Elena, Maria, Marcos, and the other patrons, he felt a surge of hope. They had witnessed something miraculous tonight, not a supernatural event, but the simple yet profound miracle of human hearts opening to one another. The challenge now would be to carry this spirit forward, to ensure that the transformation they had experienced wasn't just a fleeting moment, but the beginning of lasting change. As the conversations around them buzzed with excitement and possibility, Samuel knew that their work was just beginning. In the days following that fateful night at Le Jardin, the story of Samuel, Maria, and the mysterious old man spread like wildfire through the city. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had ignited a spark of change that was rapidly growing into a blazing movement. Marcos, true to his word, had implemented the new policy at Le Jardin. Every evening, alongside the usual clientele of business executives and socialites, one could now find individuals from all walks of life, brought in through partnerships with local shelters and community organizations. The contrast was striking. Designer suits next to worn jackets, stiletto heels beside scuffed sneakers. But the atmosphere in the restaurant had never been more vibrant. 1 week after the incident, Samuel returned to Le Jardin, this time with a purpose beyond a simple meal. He found Marcos overseeing the dinner service, a new lightness in his step and warmth in his demeanor. "Mr. Thorne," Marcos greeted him warmly, "it's wonderful to see you again. How can I assist you this evening?" Samuel smiled, taking in the diverse crowd in the restaurant. "Actually, Marcos, I'm here to speak with you. Do you have a moment?" Marcos nodded, leading Samuel to a quiet corner. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about that night," Samuel began, "about Eleanor and Maria, and all the others like them in our city. The change you've implemented here is remarkable, but I believe we can do more." Marcos leaned in, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "A program," Samuel explained, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. "A partnership between businesses like Le Jardin and individuals with skills to share. We could offer job training, mentorship, opportunities for people to lift themselves out of poverty." As Samuel outlined his vision, Marcos's expression grew more and more excited. "Mr. Thorne, this is extraordinary, but surely it would require significant resources." Samuel nodded. "It would. That's why I'm prepared to commit a substantial portion of my personal wealth to get it started. But I'll need partners, businesses willing to offer opportunities, individuals ready to serve as mentors." Marcos didn't hesitate. "Count Le Jardin in. We'd be honored to be part of this." As they shook hands, sealing their agreement, neither man noticed the elderly woman who had shown kindness to Elena that first night. She sat at a nearby table, a knowing smile on her face as she watched the two men plot a course that would change countless lives. Across town, in a small, tidy apartment, Elena sat at her sewing machine, carefully stitching a delicate piece of fabric. Since that night at Le Jardin, her life had taken an unexpected turn. Word of her skills as a seamstress had spread, and she now found herself with a steady stream of work, altering fine garments for some of Le Jardin's regular patrons. Maria burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement. "Mama, guess what? I got an A on my math test." Elena looked up, her face breaking into a proud smile. "That's wonderful, Mija. I knew all that extra studying would pay off." Maria's academic performance had improved dramatically since she'd started attending the after-school program at the community center, another initiative that had sprung up in the wake of that transformative night. As Maria chattered on about her day, Elena felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Their lives were still far from easy, but for the first time in years, she felt hope, real, tangible hope for the future. Later that evening, as the sun set, over the city skyline, the mysterious old man stood on a hill overlooking the bustling streets. He watched as lights flickered on in windows, as people hurried home from work or out to dinner, as life in all its complex beauty unfolded before him. A soft smile played on his lips as he observed the subtle but significant changes taking place throughout the city. Here, a restaurant opening its doors to those in need. There, a business owner mentoring a young person from a disadvantaged background. Everywhere, small acts of kindness and connection blossoming like flowers after a long winter. "Well done," he murmured, his words carried away by the gentle evening breeze. "You're learning. You're growing. Keep going." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the gathering twilight. The city continued its rhythmic pulse, unaware of the quiet observer who had set in motion a transformation that was only just beginning. As night fell, the lights of Le Jardin glowed warmly, a beacon of hope in a world that was slowly but surely learning to see the humanity in every individual. The journey was far from over, but the first crucial steps had been taken. The ripples of change were spreading, touching lives in ways that would resonate for generations to come. As weeks turned into months, the initial excitement of Le Jardin's new policy began to face real-world challenges. Marcos found himself navigating a complex landscape of logistics, public perception, and the occasional resistant patron. One evening, a wealthy regular customer cornered Marcos near the bar, his face flushed with indignation. "This has gone too far, Marcos," he hissed. "I came here last week and found myself seated next to a man who smelled like he hadn't bathed in days. Is this what Le Jardin has become? A glorified soup kitchen?" Marcos took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation. "Mr. Blackwell, I understand your concerns, but I assure you we haven't lowered our standards. We've raised them. We're now holding ourselves to a higher standard of humanity as well as cuisine." Mr. Blackwell scoffed. "Pretty words, but they don't change the fact that you're driving away your core clientele. Mark my words, this little experiment of yours will be the ruin of this place." As Mr. Blackwell stormed off, Marcos felt a moment of doubt creep in. Was he jeopardizing everything the restaurant had built over the years? But then he caught sight of a young woman, clearly from a disadvantaged background, savoring her meal with an expression of pure joy, and his resolve strengthened. This was right, regardless of the challenges. Meanwhile, Samuel's program was facing its own set of obstacles. While many businesses had enthusiastically joined the initiative, offering job training and employment opportunities, others were hesitant, citing concerns about risk and reliability. Samuel found himself in endless meetings, tirelessly advocating for the program. "I understand your reservations," he told a group of skeptical executives, "but I'm not asking you to lower your standards. I'm asking you to open your minds to the untapped potential in our community. These individuals may lack traditional qualifications, but they possess determination and resilience that can't be taught in any university." Slowly but surely, more businesses came on board, convinced by Samuel's passion and the early success stories emerging from the program. One such success story was Maria's mother, Elena. Through the program, she had secured an apprenticeship with a high-end fashion designer, her skilled needlework catching the eye of the notoriously picky couturier. Elena's days were now filled With the challenges of learning new techniques, navigating the fast-paced world of fashion, and balancing her growing career with her responsibilities as a mother. But every evening as she returned home to Maria, her eyes shone with a newfound confidence and purpose. Maria, too, was flourishing. The stability brought by her mother's new job and the support of the community programs had allowed her natural intelligence and curiosity to shine. Her teachers marveled at her quick mind and eagerness to learn, and she had become a peer tutor, helping other students who struggled with their studies. One afternoon, as Maria was leaving her after-school program, she spotted a familiar face, the mysterious old man who had appeared that fateful night at Le Jardin. He was sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons with a serene smile on his face. Maria approached him cautiously. "It's you," she said softly. "I remember you from the restaurant." The old man looked up, his eyes twinkling with warmth. "Hello, Maria. It's good to see you again. How have you been?" Maria's face lit up. "Things are so much better now. Mama has a new job and I'm doing really well in school. And it's all because of what happened that night." The old man nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's wonderful to hear, Maria. But remember, the change didn't come from any one person or event. It came from people choosing to see each other, to help each other. That choice is always available to us, every day." As Maria pondered his words, the old man continued, "Tell me, what do you dream of doing when you grow up?" Maria's eyes sparkled. "I want to be a doctor," she said confidently. "I want to help people who are sick or hurt, no matter who they are or where they come from." The old man's smile widened. "That's a noble dream, Maria. Hold on to it. And remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, is a step towards healing our world." As Maria waved goodbye and hurried home, the old man's words echoed in her mind. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to carry forward the spirit of compassion and connection that had transformed her life. As the seasons changed, the impact of that single night at Le Jardin continued to ripple outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. Marcos, once the epitome of snobbish exclusivity, had become a vocal advocate for inclusive hospitality. He frequently spoke at industry events, challenging other high-end establishments to rethink their approach to luxury. "True luxury," he would say, his voice passionate, "is not about exclusion. It's about creating experiences that elevate the human spirit, all human spirits." His transformation hadn't gone unnoticed. Le Jardin had been featured in several national publications, praised for its innovative approach to fine dining and social responsibility. While they had lost some of their old clientele, they had gained a new, diverse, and deeply loyal customer base. One evening, as Marcos was overseeing the dinner service, he noticed a familiar face, Mr. Blackwell, the patron who had been so vehemently opposed to the changes. To Marcos's surprise, Mr. Blackwell was deep in conversation with one of their community guests, a former homeless veteran who was now part of Samuel's job training program. As Marcos approached, he overheard snippets of their conversation. Mr. Blackwell was offering the man a position at his company, impressed by his story of resilience and determination. "Mr. Blackwell," Marcos said warmly, "it's wonderful to see you again." The older man turned, a sheepish expression on his face. "Marcos, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about this program. I've just been talking with James here, and well, let's just say my eyes have been opened." Marcos smiled, feeling a surge of emotion. "No apology necessary, sir. We're all on a journey of learning and growth." Meanwhile, Samuel's program had grown beyond his wildest expectations. What had started as a small initiative was now a citywide movement, with businesses of all sizes participating in job training, mentorship, and employment opportunities for disadvantaged individuals. But it wasn't just the direct beneficiaries whose lives were being changed. The program was fostering a new sense of community and connection throughout the city. People from different walks of life were interacting in ways they never had before, breaking down long-standing barriers of class and prejudice. Eleanor, now a rising star in the fashion world, had started a mentorship program for young girls interested in design and craftsmanship. She often thought back to that night at Le Jardin, marveling at how a single act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that had transformed not just her life, but the lives of so many others. As for Maria, she was thriving. Her dream of becoming a doctor no longer seemed like a far-fetched fantasy. With the support of her community and her own determined spirit, she was excelling in her studies, particularly in science and math. One day, as Maria was volunteering at a local health clinic, part of her preparation for her future medical career, she found herself face to face with a patient who looked strangely familiar. It was the elderly woman who had shown kindness to her and her mother that night at Le Jardin. "Well, well," the woman said, her eyes twinkling with recognition. "Look at you, all grown up and helping others. You've come a long way, my dear." Maria smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. "I remember you," she said softly. "You were kind to us when others weren't. Thank you for that." The woman patted Maria's hand. "Kindness costs nothing, child, and look at the dividends it pays. You keep that lesson close to your heart as you move forward in life." As Maria nodded, absorbing the woman's words, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was part of something larger than herself, a movement of compassion and connection that was slowly but surely changing the fabric of their society. Outside the clinic, unnoticed by either Maria or the elderly woman, the mysterious old man stood watching. A smile of quiet satisfaction played on his lips as he observed the interaction. The seeds of change that had been planted that night at Le Jardin were blossoming in ways even he hadn't anticipated. As he turned to leave, he murmured softly to himself, "Well done, little ones, well done indeed. Keep growing, keep learning, keep loving, the best is yet to come." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the bustling city streets. The work he had come to do was far from over, but in this moment, in this place, he could see the unmistakable signs of a community being transformed by the power of compassion and human connection. As the city basked in the warm glow of positive change, an unexpected challenge emerged that would test the resolve of everyone involved in the movement sparked by that fateful night at Le Jardin. A severe economic downturn hit the region, sending shockwaves through businesses both large and small. Unemployment rates soared, and many of the companies that had enthusiastically supported Samuel's program now found themselves struggling to stay afloat. Samuel received a flurry of calls and emails from business owners, regretfully informing him that they could no longer participate in the job training and employment initiatives. The progress they had made over the past months seemed in danger of unraveling. One particularly difficult conversation stuck with Samuel. Jacob Stern, the owner of a mid-sized manufacturing company and one of the program's earliest supporters, called with heavy news. "Samuel, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to pull out of the program," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're barely keeping our heads above water as it is. I can't justify keeping on trainees when I'm having to let go of long-time employees." Samuel felt a knot form in his stomach. "I understand, Jacob. These are tough times. Is there anything we can do to help?" Jacob sighed heavily. "Unless you can magically conjure up new customers and contracts, I'm afraid not. I feel like I'm letting everyone down." As Samuel hung up the phone, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had given people hope, a chance at a better life. Could he bear to see that hope extinguished? Across town, Le Jardin was facing its own set of challenges. The economic downturn had hit the restaurant industry particularly hard, and even their loyal customer base was dining out less frequently. Marcos found himself poring over the books late into the night, trying to find a way to keep the restaurant afloat without compromising on their commitment to inclusive dining. The thought of having to turn away those who had come to rely on Le Jardin's generosity filled him with dread. One evening, as Marcos was locking up after a particularly slow night, he was surprised to see Samuel approaching the restaurant. "Samuel," Marcos greeted him, noting the worried lines etched on the other man's face. "What brings you here so late?" Samuel ran a hand through his hair, his exhaustion evident. "I couldn't sleep. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out how to keep the program going in the face of this economic crisis. I thought maybe a walk would clear my head." Marcos nodded in understanding. "Why don't you come in? I think we could both use a drink and a friendly ear." As they sat at the bar sharing a bottle of wine that in better times would have been reserved for Le Jardin's most discerning patrons, Marcos and Samuel began to open up about the challenges they were facing. It feels like everything we've worked for is slipping away, Samuel confessed, swirling the wine in his glass. I keep thinking about people like Elena and Maria, about all the lives that have been changed. How can we let them down now? Marcos leaned back, his brow furrowed in thought. You know, my grandfather used to say that it's in times of crisis that we truly discover what we're made of. Maybe this isn't the end of our journey, but the next chapter. As they continued to talk, bouncing ideas off each other, a spark of hope began to ignite. What if they could find a way to pool their resources, to create a network of mutual support that could weather this economic storm? Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. To their surprise, they saw Elena standing outside, her face etched with concern. As Marcos hurried to let her in, Elena explained, I'm sorry to intrude, but I saw the lights on and I recognized your car, Samuel. I've been trying to reach you all day. Samuel straightened, alarm crossing his face. Is everything all right? Is Maria okay? Elena nodded quickly. Maria's fine. It's the design house where I work. They're talking about massive layoffs, and I'm afraid I might lose everything we've gained. As Elena's words hung in the air, the three of them looked at each other, the gravity of the situation settling over them. They were standing at a crossroads, facing a challenge that threatened to undo all the progress they had made. But in that moment, something shifted. Perhaps it was the lateness of the hour, or the shared wine, or simply the coming together of three individuals who had already witnessed the power of compassion and community. Whatever the reason, a sense of determination began to fill the room. Samuel was the first to break the silence. We're not going to let this beat us, he said, his voice gaining strength. We've come too far, touched too many lives. There has to be a way forward. Marcos nodded, a glimmer of his old confidence returning. Samuel's right. We didn't get this far by giving up when things got tough. We got here by believing in the power of community, of people coming together to lift each other up. Elena looked between the two men, hope dawning in her eyes. So what do we do? As they began to brainstorm, throwing out ideas and building on each other's thoughts, none of them noticed the figure watching through the window, the mysterious old man, a smile of approval on his face. That's it, he murmured softly. Together you are stronger than any challenge. Remember that, and you cannot fail. With that, he turned and walked away into the night, leaving behind three determined individuals on the cusp of discovering that their greatest challenges could lead to their most innovative solutions. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Samuel, Marcos, and Elena rallied their community to face the economic crisis head-on. What had begun as a late-night conversation in Le Jardin had evolved into a citywide movement of mutual support and innovative problem-solving. Samuel reached out to all the businesses that had been part of his program, but this time with a different proposition. Instead of asking them to provide jobs or training, he proposed a network of skill sharing and resource pooling. We all have something to offer, he explained during a town hall meeting that had drawn hundreds of people from all walks of life. Maybe you can't hire new employees right now, but can you spare a few hours a week to mentor someone? Can you share your expertise to help another business streamline their operations? The response was overwhelming. Business owners who had been on the verge of closing their doors found new hope in collaborative efforts. Professionals who had been laid off discovered opportunities to apply their skills in new ways. Marcos, meanwhile, had transformed Le Jardin into a hub of community activity. The restaurant now hosted networking events, skill-sharing workshops, and even a weekly community kitchen where people could come together to cook and share meals. Food has always been about bringing people together, Marcos explained to a reporter who had come to cover the initiative. We're just expanding on that idea. Le Jardin isn't just a restaurant anymore. It's a place where our community comes to nourish both body and spirit. Elena, drawing on her connections in the fashion world, had spearheaded a project to repurpose and upcycle clothing. What had started as a small workshop in the back of Le Jardin had grown into a thriving social enterprise, providing work for skilled seamstresses who had lost their jobs in the economic downturn. We're not just making clothes, Elena said proudly, surveying the busy workshop. We're weaving together the fabric of our community, creating something beautiful and lasting, out of what others might see as scraps. As word of their efforts spread, more and more people stepped forward to contribute. A local tech company offered free coding classes. A group of retired teachers set up a tutoring program. Doctors and nurses volunteered their time at free health clinics. Maria, now in her final year of high school and preparing for college, had thrown herself into organizing youth volunteers. "We might be young," she told a group of her peers, "but we have energy, ideas, and a stake in the future of this community. We can make a difference." One sunny afternoon, as Samuel was walking through a park that had once been a haven for drug deals and now bustled with community garden plots and children playing, he spotted a familiar figure, the mysterious old man who had appeared that night at Le Jardin. "I was wondering when I'd see you again," Samuel said, approaching the bench where the old man sat. The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling. "You've been busy, I see. How does it feel, seeing the fruits of your labor?" Samuel sat down beside him, taking in the scene before them. "It's incredible, overwhelming sometimes. I never imagined it would grow like this." The old man nodded sagely. "That's the thing about kindness and community, my boy. They have a way of multiplying beyond our wildest dreams." As they sat in companionable silence, Samuel felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. The challenges they faced were far from over, but in coming together, they had discovered a resilience and creativity they never knew they possessed. Across town, in the bustling workshop behind Le Jardin, Elena was teaching a group of enthusiastic newcomers the basics of garment construction. As she guided a young woman's hands through the process of threading a needle, she caught sight of her reflection in a nearby mirror. The woman she saw looking back at her was a far cry from the desperate mother who had burst into Le Jardin all those months ago. This Elena stood tall, confident, her eyes shining with purpose and hope. In that moment, Elena realized that the true transformation wasn't just in their circumstances, but in themselves. They had become the change they wanted to see in the world, and in doing so, had discovered strengths they never knew they possessed. As the day drew to a close, the city hummed with a new energy. The energy of a community united in the face of adversity, bound together by threads of compassion, innovation, and unwavering hope for the future. The crisp autumn air carried a sense of anticipation as the city prepared for an event that would mark the culmination of their collective journey. It had been exactly 1 year since that fateful night at Le Jardin, and the community had decided to commemorate the anniversary with a grand celebration of unity and resilience. The event, aptly named One Table, was to be a citywide dinner that would bring together people from all walks of life. Streets were to be closed off, with tables stretching for blocks, laden with food prepared by a coalition of restaurants, community kitchens, and home cooks. Le Jardin, once a bastion of exclusivity, now stood at the heart of the preparations. Marcos had thrown open the restaurant's doors, transforming the kitchen into a bustling command center, where chefs from five-star establishments worked alongside home cooks, each bringing their unique flavors and traditions to the table. As Marcos surveyed the organized chaos, he felt a swell of emotion. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be doing this," he mused to himself, "I would have thought they were mad." Yet here he was, at the center of a movement that had transformed not just his restaurant, but the entire city. Samuel, meanwhile, was overseeing the logistics of the massive event. What had started as a simple idea had grown into a logistical challenge of epic proportions. But as he watched volunteers from every corner of the city come together to set up tables, hang lights, and coordinate food distribution, he felt a sense of awe at what they had accomplished. "Mr. Thorne?" a voice called out. Samuel turned to see Maria running towards him, her face flushed with excitement. "We've just heard from the mayor's office. They're officially declaring today Community Unity Day." Samuel grinned, giving Maria a high five. "That's fantastic news, and it's all thanks to hard workers like you, Maria." As the afternoon wore on and the start of the event drew near, a palpable excitement filled the air. People began to gather, dressed in everything from designer suits to work uniforms to traditional cultural attire. The diversity of the crowd was a testament to how far they had come. Eleanor, resplendent in a dress of her own design made from upcycled materials, was helping to coordinate the seating arrangements. Her goal was to ensure that each table had a mix of people from different backgrounds, fostering new connections and conversations. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, the mysterious old man appeared once again. He stood on a small rise, overlooking the scene before him with a smile of deep satisfaction. Samuel, catching sight of him, made his way through the crowd. "I was hoping you'd be here," he said warmly. "This all started with you, you know." The old man shook his head gently. "No, my boy, it started with a choice, your choice, to see beyond appearances, to extend a hand of kindness. I merely provided an opportunity. You and this entire community did the rest." Before Samuel could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. Marcos had taken to a makeshift stage, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Friends, neighbors, fellow citizens," he began. "1 year ago, a single act of kindness in my restaurant set off a chain reaction that has brought us all here today. We've faced challenges, we've overcome obstacles, but most importantly, we've discovered the incredible power of unity and compassion." As Marcos spoke, recounting the journey that had led them to this moment, many in the crowd were moved to tears. They saw their own stories reflected in his words, stories of struggle, of hope, of unexpected friendships and newfound purpose. "And so," Marcos continued, his voice thick with emotion, "I invite you all now to take your seats, not as rich or poor, not as natives or newcomers, but as one community, united in our shared humanity." With that, people began to find their places at the long tables. The air was filled with the buzz of conversation, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses. Strangers became friends as they passed dishes back and forth, sharing not just food but stories and dreams. Samuel found himself seated between a CEO he had once tried to impress and a former homeless man who now ran a successful small business. As they talked and laughed together, Samuel marveled at how natural it felt, how the barriers that had once seemed so insurmountable had melted away. Across the table, he saw Eleanor deep in conversation with a group of young fashion design students, her eyes alight with passion as she discussed sustainable fashion. Maria, at a nearby table, was animatedly describing her plans for medical school to an attentive audience of both doctors and those who had once thought higher education was out of reach. As the evening wore on, the mysterious old man made his way through the crowd, pausing here and there to offer a word of encouragement or a gentle touch on the shoulder. Few noticed him, caught up as they were in the joy of the moment, but his presence seemed to add an extra layer of warmth to the atmosphere. Finally, as the moon rose high in the sky and the city twinkled with lights, Marco stood once again. Raising his glass, he called for attention. "My friends," he said, his voice carrying across the now hushed tables, "I'd like to propose a toast to kindness, which opens doors we never knew existed, to community, which gives us strength to face any challenge, and to each and every one of you who have shown that when we come together, there is no limit to what we can achieve." As glasses clinked and cheers erupted, Samuel felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find the old man standing beside him, a serene smile on his face. "Well done," the old man said softly. "You've learned the most important lesson of all, that true wealth lies not in what we have, but in how we treat each other." With that, the old man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Samuel watched him go, a sense of peace settling over him. He knew somehow that they wouldn't see the old man again. His work here was done. As Samuel turned back to the table, rejoining the lively conversation, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had begun as a simple dinner invitation had blossomed into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. They had not just changed their city, they had rediscovered the true meaning of community, of humanity. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of newfound friends and the joy of shared purpose, Samuel knew that this was just the beginning. The real journey, the journey of maintaining and growing this spirit of unity and compassion, was only just beginning. In the months that followed the one-table event, the city continued to evolve, shaped by the spirit of unity and compassion that had taken root. The changes were visible everywhere, from the bustling community centers that had sprung up in two once abandoned buildings to the vibrant murals that now adorned city walls, each telling a story of hope and transformation. Le Jardin, under Marcos's visionary leadership, had become more than just a restaurant. It was now a culinary school, offering free classes to aspiring chefs from underprivileged backgrounds. The kitchen buzzed with energy as seasoned professionals worked alongside eager students, creating a fusion of flavors that reflected the diversity of their city. One afternoon, as Marcos was overseeing a particularly challenging lesson on French cuisine, he caught sight of a familiar face at the back of the class. It was Mr. Blackwell, the once cynical patron who had initially resisted the changes at Le Jardin. "Mr. Blackwell," Marcos greeted him warmly, "what brings you to our humble kitchen?" The older man smiled, a hint of sheepishness in his expression. "I've been watching what you've been doing here, Marcos. It's inspiring. I was wondering if you might have room for one more volunteer." Marcos felt a surge of emotion, remembering how far they had come. "We always have room for those willing to learn and share, Mr. Blackwell. Welcome aboard." Across town, Samuel's program had evolved into a citywide network of mutual support and skill sharing. The economic challenges that had once threatened to derail their progress had instead spurred innovation and collaboration. One of the network's greatest successes was a series of small business incubators, providing support and resources to budding entrepreneurs from all walks of life. Samuel often found himself in awe of the creativity and determination displayed by these new business owners. On this particular day, he was visiting one such incubator, housed in a renovated warehouse. As he walked through the space, he saw people working on everything from artisanal crafts to cutting-edge technology. His tour guide was none other than Elena, who had taken on a leadership role in the incubator program. "And over here," she said, gesturing to a bright corner workspace, "is our latest success story." Samuel looked over to see Maria, now a confident young woman on the cusp of starting medical school, demonstrating a simple but ingenious medical device she had invented. It was designed to be easily producible and distributable in resource-poor areas, potentially saving countless lives. "Maria," Samuel called out, his voice filled with pride. "This is incredible." Maria looked up, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Mr. Thorne, I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to thank you. None of this would have been possible without that night at Le Jardin. You showed me that one person really can make a difference." As Samuel listened to Maria explain her invention, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was the true power of compassion and opportunity. It created a ripple effect, touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured. Later that evening, Samuel found himself walking through the city park, lost in thought. The park, once neglected and avoided, was now a vibrant community space, filled with families, fitness enthusiasts, and people simply enjoying the peace of nature in the heart of the city. As he rounded a bend in the path, he came across a familiar figure, the elderly woman who had shown kindness to Elena and Maria that fateful night at Le Jardin. She sat on a bench feeding pigeons and watching the sunset with a contented smile. "May I join you?" Samuel asked politely. The woman looked up, recognition sparking in her eyes. "Of course, young man. It's good to see you again." As Samuel sat down, he felt a need to express the gratitude that had been building in him for months. "I wanted to thank you," he said softly. "Your kindness that night, it was the spark that lit the flame." The old woman chuckled softly. "Oh, my dear, kindness is like a flame. It only takes one small spark to start a fire that can warm an entire city." She paused, her eyes twinkling with a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond her years. "But remember, a fire needs tending. It needs fuel and care to keep burning bright." Samuel nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. What they had built was beautiful, but it would require ongoing effort and dedication to maintain and grow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Kaito journey they had begun that night at Le Jardin was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. The true test would be in the days, months, and years to come, in the small, everyday choices, to choose compassion over indifference, inclusion over exclusion, hope over cynicism. But as Samuel looked out over the park, at the diverse tapestry of humanity enjoying the evening together, he felt confident that they were up to the challenge. The mysterious old man might have disappeared, but his lesson lived on in every act of kindness, every extended hand, every opened door. And in that enduring legacy, Samuel saw the true miracle, not a supernatural event, but the profound, world-changing power of human compassion and connection. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the city skyline, Samuel stood at the window of his office, a cup of coffee warming his hands. The view before him was both familiar and transformed. The same buildings and streets he had known for years, now infused with a new energy, a palpable sense of community and purpose. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcos. "Turn on the high." "News, Channel 5. Curious, Samuel flicked on the television mounted on his office wall. The morning news was just starting, and the anchor's voice filled the room. "Good morning, everyone. We start today with an extraordinary announcement. Our city has been selected as a model for urban renewal and community engagement by the United Nations. A delegation will be visiting next month to study the remarkable transformation that has taken place here over the past year." Samuel sank into his chair, a mix of emotions washing over him. Pride, certainly, but also a deep sense of humility. He knew that this recognition belonged not to him or to any one person, but to every member of the community who had chosen to open their hearts and extend their hands to one another. As the news continued, detailing the various initiatives that had caught the UN's attention, Samuel's phone lit up with messages of congratulations and excitement. But one message stood out, a simple text from an unknown number. "Well done, remember this is not the end but a new beginning. A friend." Samuel smiled, knowing instinctively who the message was from. The mysterious old man might have disappeared from sight, but his presence was still felt in the continued unfolding of their shared journey. Later that morning, Samuel made his way to Le Jardin for a celebration breakfast with Marcos, Elena, and Maria. As he approached the restaurant, he was struck by how different it looked from that night a year ago. The once imposing facade now seemed warm and inviting, with large windows allowing passers-by to see the lively interior. Inside, the restaurant was buzzing with activity. Students from the culinary program were preparing breakfast under Marcos's watchful eye, while community members from all walks of life chatted and laughed at the tables. "Samuel!" Eleanor called out, waving him over to a corner table. As he sat down, he was immediately enveloped in a group hug, the warmth of friendship dispelling the morning chill. "Can you believe it?" Maria exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "The UN, it's like a dream." Marcos nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It is incredible. But you know, as proud as I am of this recognition, I'm even more proud of how far we've all come as individuals." They all fell silent for a moment, reflecting on the truth of Marcos's words. Each of them had grown and changed in ways they never could have anticipated a year ago. "You know," Elena said softly, "I keep thinking about something that old man said that night, about how true wealth isn't about what we have, but about how we treat each other. I didn't fully understand it then, but now we're living it," Samuel finished for her. As they continued their breakfast, sharing stories and plans for the future, Samuel felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't always been easy. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, challenges that had tested their resolve. But through it all they had persevered, buoyed by the strength of their community and the power of their shared vision. As the morning wore on, and the restaurant filled with more people coming to share in the celebration, Samuel found himself thinking about the road ahead. The UN recognition was a validation of how far they had come, but it was also a responsibility, a call to continue growing, learning and sharing their experience with others. He thought about cities around the world facing similar challenges, poverty, division, apathy, and he realized that their story could serve as a beacon of hope, a testament to what was possible when people came together with open hearts and a commitment to positive change. As he looked around at the diverse, joyful faces that filled Le Jardin, Samuel knew that this was just the beginning. The real work, the daily choice to lead with compassion, to bridge divides, to lift each. Other up would be ongoing, but he also knew that they were ready for the challenge. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of community and the promise of a new day, Samuel raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to kindness, to perseverance, to the boundless potential of human connection, to the journey that had brought them here, and to the countless journeys yet to come. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the city in golden light, a new chapter was beginning. Not just for Samuel or for Le Jardin, or even for their city, but for all those who would be touched by their story and inspired to create change in their own communities. The miracle they had witnessed wasn't in any supernatural event, but in the extraordinary power of ordinary people choosing day after day to believe in the best of humanity and to act on that belief. And in that ongoing miracle, Samuel saw the truest reflection of the divine, the capacity for love, growth, and transformation that resides in every human heart. As he looked towards the future, Samuel felt a sense of peace and purpose wash over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together, bound by the unbreakable threads of compassion and community that they had woven over the past year. And in that knowledge, in that unshakable bond of shared humanity, lay the greatest victory of all. You might also like one of the 2 videos on the screen. Feel free to watch them now or subscribe to the channel to watch them later. Thanks for watching.